the sound of success.
Welcome back. This is the Midday Majlis on Mirror Business FM with myself, Sahar Mushtaq. And now, from booming sectors to changing capital flows, the investment story in MENA and emerging markets is becoming more dynamic than ever. So, to break it all down, we're joined today by Usman Farooqui, the founder of Intrepid Capital, to discuss the region's evolving investment landscape in detail. Welcome to the show, Usman. It's really good to have you with us.
Thank you, Sahar. It's always a pleasure.
So, to begin with, let's get a sense of the overall investment environment. How would you describe the current investment climate across the MENA region compared to other emerging markets?
Right. So it's interesting. Last year, if you look at the global investment landscape, it was dominated by AI, artificial intelligence, and the MENA stocks, unfortunately, were not able to capitalize on that bandwagon. The region, interestingly, if you look at it, I mean, we're sitting in Dubai right now. Dubai is a great global story in terms of diversification away from oil. And booming real estate sector, booming banking sector. But if you look at the region as a whole, it's still quite oil dependent. So oil prices have been pretty toned down over the past year or so, and we've seen a muted performance across most country markets in the region.
Right. And now looking at the big picture, those which are forces shaping the market, what major macroeconomical trends are shaping investor confidence in the MENA region right now?
Right. As mentioned, oil is of course one big factor. However, especially for the region, the GCC, there's been a lot of foreign investor interest, especially after COVID. So the way, for example, Dubai opened up after COVID, where it releases restrictions very soon, and we saw a big inflow, not just of tourists, but of high net worth individuals and entrepreneurs wanting to relocate to
Emerge in the
Dubai's
business world here.
emerging business world here. And in Saudi Arabia, consequently, we saw the implementation of the Vision 2030, and the opening up of the society, opening up the economy. So we've seen a lot of investor interest and travel, including tourism, to the region.
Yeah, I think the tourism is really booming at the moment than ever before.
Absolutely. So you've seen, many Gulf countries, especially UAE and Saudi Arabia, set up the infrastructure whereby they have, increased their airport capacity. They have, in the case of Saudi Arabia, set up completely new zones on the Red Sea, Al Ula. In the case of Dubai, you're seeing a lot more events being held. So it's and a lot of new attractions in terms of entertainment opening up. So there is a concerted effort by the authorities in the region to attract more tourists, and we've seen that effect in terms of rising tourist numbers.
And which countries in the region are standing out as the most attractive for foreign direct investment and why?
So the UAE has been a haven of foreign direct investment, and the reason being that it opened up to foreign investment a long time ago. So the UAE has always been a favored destination for foreign direct investment. Especially in recent times, we've seen big transactions in the real estate space where a lot of foreign real estate institutions have moved in to develop, residential mixed-use office spaces.
Right.
In Saudi Arabia, also, there's been a lot of movement towards, opening up the economy and the sectors to foreign investors. So legally speaking, there's been a lot of legal changes which enables the foreign investors to, take a greater share of the businesses, and in some cases, they can own 100% share in certain sectors. So that's been a big catalyst in attracting FDI. But again, it's early in the game, so the next few years will be very exciting to see.
Very interesting. And of course, regional stability plays a great role here as well. Would you agree?
Absolutely. So in the Middle East, there's always a hot spot of geopolitical activity, and that's historically been the result of resulted in quite a lot of volatility in terms of economic sentiment. But this region, especially the GCC, has weathered the storm very well throughout. So it's been a beacon of stability in what is generally a very considered a very volatile region.
And the change just happens in a blink of an eye.
Absolutely. So, things are very unpredictable. There are, global events which, catch a
Actually,
lot of
moving
people.
very fast at a very fast pace here in the
Absolutely. And,
GCC.
there are unpredictable consequences. But thankfully, especially in the GCC, the economic story has continued to play out regardless of, regional ups and downs.
Right. So now turning to industries, let's see where growth is strongest. So, which sectors in the MENA region are currently offering the strongest growth potential for investors?
So, in the UAE specifically, real estate has been a big growth sector, and the reason, especially after COVID, where the golden visa rules were enacted, a lot of people are now seeing UAE as a long-term destination rather than a short-term investment destination. So that's one area of growth. In other areas, we've seen the region is blessed with a lot of hydrocarbons. There's a lot of energy. There's a lot of resources in terms of oil, gas, and not just those, but in terms of other minerals like copper, lithium. So we're seeing a lot of activity in the mining sector. We are seeing a lot of interest to put up manufacturing industries here, which benefit from competitive energy prices. We're seeing a lot of infrastructure development, whereby we're seeing the construction of railroads to connect these new mines and new factories. So there's a lot of stuff happening here, but particularly these sectors are where the governments are focused on, and we're seeing the most growth.
Right. And how is the region diversifying beyond the traditional sectors?
Absolutely. So a key aspect of the vision of the region is to attract the best human capital, and for that, like I mentioned, there's been a loosening of visa restrictions. There have been an opening of the society, especially in Saudi Arabia, to attract global talent.
Right.
So there's a conscious effort to ensure that the expats community who bring in a lot of the talent are able to come and start their own businesses, or even if they're in a certain employment, they're much more flexible than they were before. So they're making it a much more attractive environment to attract global talent. And of course, this region has its own certain advantages, which is incredible safety, great infrastructure, improving state of education. The healthcare is also excellent. So to take advantage of those key advantages, you're seeing a big population flows into the region.
And into technology and innovation driven industries, right?
Absolutely. So technology is again the region is a key investor in AI technologies, AI and data centers. We've seen announcements of huge capital spending going into these, and again, this will enable the setup of an ecosystem whereby it will attract a lot of tech talent. Because the region is creating the infrastructure in terms of data centers, whereby and fast connectivity, which will enable tech talent to come here, set up businesses. And so, I mean, the tech ecosystem is still in a nascent stage here, but we're setting the right building blocks for its long-term growth.
And here I would like to add that the government projects can be a major driver for investment. So, how significant is the role of the government-backed mega projects in driving the investments?
So the government is, a key driver of policy, and the government, in a way, can create new sectors where the private sector would find it difficult to come up with that this level of investment where, so for instance, in terms of AI, it requires very heavy spending, and it requires a creation of an ecosystem, special zones, with certain tax incentives. So all of these things are driven by the government itself. And now, in terms of the mega projects, those projects are not only to build new cities or
Attractions.
create new attractions, but those itself need a lot of digital capacity or digital services, which provide a ready market for companies looking to set up shop here.
Right. And then now coming to sustainability is actually increasingly important for investors globally. So would you agree to that?
100%. So global warming has been a key theme among environmentalists for the past
Couple of years now.
couple of years, and even going behind that, it's been, and we've seen that in weather patterns globally. So we're seeing much more volatile weather. So having said that, it's interesting that the countries in the region, especially the GCC, which are rich in oil reserves, they are the ones taking lead in terms of renewable energy, and that's just not for the diversification of the economy, but also because of they've set long-term goals to get to a net zero carbon footprint, which is benefits all of us around the world.
A lot of trees are being planted in the GCC now. Have you seen that?
Absolutely. And it's part of sort of like a green revolution,
True.
and planting trees is not just important for provide provision of oxygen. It improves the livability of cities. So a lot of the complaints we receive is in the region, it's a great place, but there's lack of greenery. I think that's something which is being addressed with this, because the more open spaces there are, the more park spaces there are, the more the livability increases.
Right. And now let's check how regional markets are performing compared to the global peers. How are regional stock markets performing compared to global emerging market indices?
So last year was a great year for emerging markets. And when we say emerging markets, these are markets which are considered fast growth. So these are typically in Asia. These are typically include the MENA region, and they exclude the developed economies of US, Europe, and Japan.
Right.
So emerging markets have traditionally underperformed over the last 10 years, but last year saw a great growth momentum, and the reason being that these countries were very conservative in their fiscal policies after COVID. So unlike the Western countries, which printed a lot of money, that resulted in inflation, the emerging market governments were a lot more disciplined. So we've seen them growing again, and the last 12 months, emerging market indices have done exceptionally well. The regional indices have underperformed, and again, the reason is lower oil prices. But having said that, it's going to take a long time for diversification, but the trend has already started. So we're seeing the breadth of the market in terms of the number of industries represented in local indices grow, which is a very positive sign for the future.
Right. And only time will tell that how much of a growth we will see this year because the year has just started. And so, what role are sovereign wealth funds playing in the region at the moment?
So, sovereign wealth funds, the job of the sovereign wealth funds is to, take excess capital that the region generates from the export of oil and other materials, and deploy them into investments both globally and internationally. Globally and locally. Now, in recent years, we've seen these sovereign wealth funds deploy a lot of those resources locally as well to drive the local economy. And this is, as we discussed, part of the vision to diversify the economy. So these sovereign wealth funds, which are cash rich, can play a key role in setting up new industries within the region.
And how do you think this is shaping the investments momentum?
I think the more investment which happens locally attracts other investment. So if a foreign investor wants to come to a certain country, they would be their confidence would be much higher if the government is, also doing a lot of domestic spending. So based on that, you would see a lot more follow-on investment coming from both private individuals as well as foreign entities.
Right. Well, we are going to talk to you more about this right after a short break. We're in conversation with Usman Farooqui, who is the founder of Intrepid Capital, and we will be back with more after a short break. This is the Midday Majlis on Mirror Business FM. Welcome back. This is Midday Majlis with myself, Sahar Mushtaq, on Mirror Business FM. And we're in conversation with Usman Farooqui, who is here in the studio with us. He's the founder of Intrepid Capital. And we are actually going to talk to Usman now about the growth of venture capital across the region. So, is venture capital keeping pace with the rapid growth of the startup ecosystem in the MENA region?
So venture capital is definitely a growth market. The industry is still maturing, and there's space for a lot more venture capital dollars to flow to opportunities in the region. Having said that, 2000, it's the industry is a lot more developed than, let's say, 10 years ago, when there were only a handful of venture capital asset managers in the region. And now you see proliferation of quite a number of these managers, apart from, early stage accelerators, venture studios. So there is now a decent ecosystem where a founder with an idea can go and pitch their prospects to a number of potential investors.
Right. And now let's drill down into tech to see where investors are placing their bets. So, which technology subsectors are attracting the most funding?
In terms of technology, we've seen recently, in the past decade or so, a lot of focus on delivery services, fintech, insurance tech. A lot of the online marketplaces. So we've seen a significant growth and maturity of these particular sectors. Now, what we're seeing recently is the next stage of development, where we're seeing a lot of startups focusing on industrial automation, more higher tech manufacturing than what we've seen in the region. So there is an evolution, certainly, in terms of what the new tech ecosystem is moving towards.
And regulatory frameworks can make or break the innovation, as we know. So, how important are regulatory reforms in supporting the innovation and the entrepreneurship?
And again, so that's a great question. So, I mean, the gold standard, again, for a lot of these industries is the US, where, the bankruptcy law, protects or assists a lot of people taking risks, where, people are not afraid to take risks. There's always some downside protection that even if the company fails, there is a certain way to get around that for the individuals involved. Also, there's a culture which encourages innovation, and failure is not looked at as if it's something negative, but something actually positive, where a lot of learning stays
Constructive.
constructive. So
Right.
we're seeing that a lot of people taking those particular risks, especially in a city like Dubai, which is very entrepreneurial. We see multiple serial entrepreneurs, and in entrepreneurship, not all businesses are successful, but we see fostering of that culture in the region.
And of course, every opportunity comes with risk. So, what are the biggest risks investors should be aware of when entering the MENA markets?
As we've discussed previously, this is a volatile region, and sometimes the wider economy is not immune from these changes, whether it's change in oil prices, whether it's some geopolitical event affecting the oil prices and the sentiment. So that's those challenges are there. Having said that, this is still a market where a lot of ideas are untested and have been unimplemented. So anybody coming up with a certain idea, and with good execution skills, there is a large, high income market that is, ripe for targeting. So it's a fertile place to start new businesses, and of course, if you grow big enough, there are certain macroeconomic trends that you have to take care of. But for anybody on starting on a relatively small to medium sized scale, I don't think that's too much of their concern.
Right. And how do you think currency fluctuations and inflation actually is affecting the long-term investment here in the region?
So the good thing is, the GCC currencies are mostly pegged to the US dollar, so we don't see currency fluctuations. We see currency fluctuations outside the GCC, the rest of the MENA, case in point being Egypt, which has over the years seen a significant drawdown in the currency. But having said that, currency depreciation is a regular part of emerging markets generally, and is a characteristic of their growing status. But over time, if you do invest in a country and you pick the right investments, you will overcome the currency fall in currency and compensate more than that in terms of the returns you will make.
Right. And are there structural reforms still needed to make the region more competitive globally?
Absolutely. So there's always space to make the region more competitive. So the region is already competitive in ease of doing business, and especially in recent years where it's become easier for expats to come in and set up businesses. It's been that case in Dubai for quite a while, and things are changing in Saudi Arabia and the other
Yeah,
GCC
I know
countries.
that in Saudi Arabia, e-visa, the tourist e-visa thing was never a thing.
Never a thing, and it was
Yeah.
actually very difficult to actually get a visa, even for family members of expats residing there.
But
But
now it has just become so much easier
the situation has turned completely on its head, and now, I mean, anybody from a certain list of countries can get visa on arrival, and
as
they
well. Yeah. And it's only making investors' lives more easier.
absolutely, and investors prefer to see the place where they like to invest. So we've seen many investors come in, and they never thought, for example, Saudi Arabia would have Western brands like Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts, and they're pleasantly surprised. So visiting definitely makes a difference.
It does. And are there structural reforms still needed to make the region more competitive? This is what we've talked about. But how do you see the investment landscape in MENA evolving over the next 5 years?
I think you'll see the development momentum continuing in terms of reforms. As we discussed, a key reform was, attracting FDI. And again, FDI is not technically needed for these economies, similar to what the other emerging economies need, because this region is already very rich in hydrocarbons. But it shows the foresight of the leaders, where they want to diversify their economies beyond oil. So they're thinking beyond the next 50 years, when maybe oil may or may not be used in the global economy. So you're seeing steps, conscious steps, in this regard, and we've seen not only in UAE and Saudi Arabia, but recently in Kuwait, a lot of reforms, structural reforms. Again, these are related to reducing the cost of doing business, increasing, the easing the rules of hiring foreign workers. So all of these structural issues, which were bottlenecks previously, have been eased to a significant extent.
Right. And finally, what advice would you give investors looking at the region today?
So, the region has had not a great year last year, in terms of, specifically, if we talk about stock market performance. But again, we've seen historically this region has always bounced back whenever there's been a bad cycle. And the resilience of the region in terms of its dynamism, the quality of human capital which is moving here, and the government's priorities, it's only a matter of time when we'll see another cyclical uptick in terms of the markets here. So I would say that in terms of the region, I would like to stay very positive. I recommend investors to be invested in certain certain sectors, and maybe we can discuss that at some later sitting. But there is a lot of opportunity in the region. I would recommend investors to to do a deep dive on number of big names, blue chip companies, and a lot of them are trading at very attractive multiples right now. So I think it's a great time to invest in domestic markets.
That's great advice. We really appreciate your time, Usman. Thank you so much for being able to join us and shed light on the opportunities and trends shaping investment in the region.
Thank you so much.
It
It's
was
been
a
a pleasure.
pleasure to have you with us. And that wraps up our discussion on MENA markets, from emerging sectors to shifting investment trends. It's clear the region is more dynamic than ever before, offering a plenty for investors to watch closely. And once again, that brings us to the end of today's Midday Majlis. I'll be back with more engaging conversations and interesting discussions. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Mirror Business FM. Until next time, this is Sahar Mushtaq signing off.
Mira Business FM, Dubai's home of business radio.